Carrying on with John's Gospel, it's John 9, first 7 verses. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been born blind. His disciples asked him, "Teacher, whose sin caused him to be born blind? Was it his own or his parents' sin?" Jesus answered, "His blindness has nothing to do with his sins or his parents' sins. He is blind so that God's power might be seen at work in him. As long as it is day, we must keep on doing the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." After he said this, Jesus spat on the ground and made some mud with the spittle. He rubbed the mud in the man's eyes and said, "Go and wash your face in the pool of Siloam." This name means sent. So the man went, washed his face, and came back seeing. When I read this passage, when I read it again during the week, I was initially very irritated with the disciples. Here they are, faced with a man in real need, a man who is blind, and they decide they'll have some kind of theological discussion about him. One of the worst things you can do with somebody who is disabled is to stand there and talk about them. So then, can you imagine this man who's a beggar and he's blind, and they turn up and say, so why do you think he's blind then? You know, whose sin was it? It's a really appalling situation. They're certainly not going to do anything about it at all, but they are going to talk about it. But I stopped being irritated halfway through the week because I reckon that in one way or another I'm very similar to that myself. And although you may be better than me on average, and although we might just reflect on what they were thinking and we don't precisely know, I think there's some useful things in just starting to reflect on why they weren't going to do anything but why they were going to talk theology. I think if you were to look at this man, it says he was blind from birth. So let's just say he's congenitally blind. He's not just got an illness, he's just not got an infection of his eyes, if that's bad enough. He's just blind. So it looks as though that's the way he is, just like the colour of his hair. So are you going to do anything about this? Well, not really. It goes into the too difficult box. I think it's really interesting. All the things you've got in your life, other people have got in their lives around you this morning, which you could put into the too difficult to do box. I've got my box and you will have your boxes. But actually, funny enough, although you come full of faith and praise this morning, if I said to you, so what's up for change this morning, there will certainly be some things that look possible and some things that look less possible, and some things that are definitely dumped in the too difficult to do box, although you wouldn't tell me. I was thinking about what goes in. For instance, I'm pretty good at praying about things like toothache and headache. I don't know why I am, they hurt, but I think they're going to give to prayer. But other things I'm less good at. Why is they in the box? You know, why don't I'm not good at, although I've got a good track record, I'm not good at praying for things I've lost. Because I think they're somewhere, aren't they? I can't see how it works, but it does work, but I'm bad at that. And then there might be other things that I might be sort of not sure whether they're too difficult or not, like praying that somebody else should forgive me for something. It's kind of, it's a good thing to pray for, is it going to work, sort of thing, you know. So this morning you might say, what's in the too difficult to do box? I think they thought this guy was definitely not there, you know. But you'd be different. But being good Christian people, they're not going to do nothing, so they're going to do something, so they'll talk. They'll talk about it, you know. Perhaps this is displacement activity. Displacement activity is something you do instead of doing what you ought to be doing. We get this when we're challenged to be very generous. Not a bit generous, but very generous. And immediately we start talking about whether it will be good for the person to receive the money. We still do psychoanalysis of this person. Oh, is it going to be the right thing to give them this money? You know, is it going to spoil them? Is it going to, and we've got all this business. What are we talking about? We're talking about not giving them the money. So we'll talk about something else. Talking about overseas missions sort of thing. It's amazing when somebody comes up with an idea that's going to cost the church and be very painful. Say, not say in Africa, let's say in India. It's amazing the meetings I've been in where somebody suddenly says, is that the best place in India to give the money? Oh, not sure. We do an analysis of everywhere and everybody you could give money to in India, which kicks it into the long grass for the next 3 months. Because it's displacement activity. I've spent much of my life, one time or another, in one church or another, going to home groups, cell groups, discussion groups, all kinds of groups who have talked about things which we never did. But at least we talked about them. You know? So at least they're going to discuss this guy. They're going to give them his attention, even if he goes on being blind. But I think also, if I've been with them, that you see, they're disciples. They do spirituality. They are disciples of a rabbi. They're learning about the law. They're learning about God. They're learning about sin. They're learning about all those things. So when they arrive, they are not ophthalmic surgeons. So they think, all we can do is talk spiritual things, although the guy has got a real problem with his eyes. Because there's a disjoint, there's a dysfunction. It's a feeling one is not going to bear on the other. It's not easy to see how this comes. It's just like the feeling of the 5,000. We know we've got the Son of God here. We know we have Jesus, the Messiah here. But how does that translate into bread? I mean, bread is bread. Bread is not blessing, is it? How does the spiritual Son of God impact through us or by us or wherever it is with us onto the bread or the storm or this man's blindness? They're moving from the spiritual to the physical, and we're a bit iffy about that. Some of you will do better at places than others. So this morning you can have all sorts of issues which you could bring to the Lord this morning, and you think, well, are they too difficult? Or should we talk about something else? Or, Alastair, don't talk about that. We'd rather sing another song. And I'll get the band out and we'll all feel better, you see. How often is singing another song in worship a displacement activity? I think so. How often have you that like celebratory worship hoped that when you've had 2 hours of singing loudly, you'll feel better and it'll all be okay when you go home? But it wasn't, was it? How often, and I say this very carefully, have we said to somebody, I'm sorry I'm not able to help, but I'll pray for you. Now, prayer is an activity, prayer is a valuable thing, but prayer can also be a displacement activity. I'm not going to do what I could do because it's too costly, but I'll pray for you. Be that as it may, Jesus is not like this at all. Jesus does not have a too difficult to do box, although I don't believe that sometimes, but it is true. Jesus does not have a too difficult to do box, and certainly doesn't do displacement activity because he gets on with it. And this is the core of the passage, really. It's tremendous. He restates that he is the light of the world. We had that I was going to say it's about a chapter ago, and about 6 weeks ago we looked at it. Jesus, the light of the world. And we think of a tremendous spiritual reality, a metaphor of Jesus' love, in Jesus' enlightenment, in Jesus' warmth, in Jesus' life, in Jesus' guidance. I am the light of the world. Yes. But from this spiritual base, Jesus says, and we must keep working. So this light works. I know that you can say a torch works, but working. This is not just blessing and warmth and lightness and love. This is working, but we must carry on working. And then Jesus intervenes, you see, from his being the light of the world. He doesn't just say, bless you, my son, I'm so sorry you're blind. He intervenes, doesn't he? And the intervention is quite dramatic. He spits on the ground and makes some mud and slaps it on this guy's eyes. Tremendous picture here of Jesus himself in his spittle mixing with the dirt. Here we have God engaging with the grot. Here we have the spiritual engaging with the most physical that you could have and mixing this amalgam of spit and dirt into mud. Is that not incarnation? Wow. And anyway, he then slaps it on the guy's eyes. And my uncle was blind all of his life. I'm not sure he wanted me to slap mud on his eyes. It's almost making it the bad worse, really. What? Oh, all this, And then he says, go, and it wants a response. Now go and wash it off. And the guy goes, rather than saying, well, you just put it on there, you know. It's a very challenging situation, this. It's where Jesus is taking it on. The man goes and washes. He arrives back wet with the mud washed off him, seeing. Wow. At one end, I am the light of the world. At the other end, the guy sees. The light works. The spit is mixed in with the mud. There is breakthrough. This is divine footprint, if ever there was one. Wow. That is the picture that we need for us. Without the drama and without having to be blind, the fact that Jesus this morning, who is with us in his spirit, says, so what have you got? What are the problems that you've got? What are the issues you have? Do you think they're too hard? Do you want to talk about something else? Or do you believe that I could come in and make a difference, to make an impact of the spiritual into whatever it is? And this is not just another teaching about faith healing. Jesus talks about blindness of all sorts. I mean, some of the Jews of various categories, he talks about them being blind guides because they're so ignorant in what they taught the people. He said they had people blindness in the way they had an attitude to women or Samaritans or lepers or children. They were blind. They had a social blindness in the way they treated the Sabbath. And right down at the spiritual theological end, they were blind in not recognizing that he was the Son of God, that he was the Messiah. In other words, they were blind about what you and I would now call the Trinity. That's about as spiritual and religious as you can get. So from the very physical blindness of this guy can't see, right, they are blind in terms of the divinity of the Son, and everything in between, people are blind. Jesus deals with all of that. And so there's a whole spectrum from what you might call the concrete right to the spiritual. And one bears on the other. One bears on the other. And they're all mixed up. But Jesus can deal with them all. I have to hear that again. So think about material things at the moment. Because the issue is not just whether they're material or not. It's a matter of whether they're tangible. Think about tangible things at the moment that are physical. It could be an illness. It could be a real pain. It could be a financial issue or whatever. It might be something anyway that's a real practical physical pain and difficulty. And I'm thinking, that is a challenge. It's a challenge that Jesus can break through in this way, in this, you know. I'm thinking that lost thing, what I need to do is look more carefully for what I've lost, you know. I'm going to get rounded in that way. Or, and I say this with sensitivity, I will feel myself sometimes if I'm ill, which is rare, but I am sometimes, it's all down to the doctor, really, sort of thing. So I'm putting that off. Or perhaps the middle stuff like psychological, mental, emotional, sort of abstract, intellectual things. Well, I've got a problem with this. I need to deal with this. I'm ignorant about this. I've got hang-ups about that. I'm neurotic about this. I'm anxious about this. Can the Spirit bear on this? And you're tempted to feel it can't, you know. So, Jesus can't break through there, you know, I mean. It's just me. I've always been like this. I've always been grumpy about that. I've always been angry. I've always been jealous about that. I've always been like that. Or then I'll say, what I need a holiday. You know, displacement activity rather than needing Jesus. I need a holiday. Or I need somebody to be nice to me. Or whatever. You know, there's so many ways around it. I need counselling. Well, perhaps you do. But, you know, it's a way that you work around it, you see. And when we get down to the spiritual end of the spectrum, you think, we should be there by now. This is what the spiritual works with, perhaps my sins or whatever it is. Actually, if we're not talking about the tangibleness of God breaking into some concrete things, I'm not sure that we really do the business in what we call the spiritual things. I think that's a problem. So that I'm forgiven, I've come to the cross and I'm forgiven, but I don't really feel forgiven because I haven't forgiven myself. And I've got that little thing in the back of my mind saying, you can't rewrite history. It's still there, especially if it's serious. So the forgiveness doesn't work because it's something tangible. Or I don't feel forgiven until everybody else has forgiven me, even if Jesus has forgiven me. I want them to forgive me as well. So, you see, it's not easy. It's not really a matter, is this a physical healing or is it a spiritual forgiveness? It is whether it's tangible or not. This man was very tangible. He was very blind. And in all the things you bring this morning, the tough things are the tangible things about the whole spectrum of your life. Real things. Rather than the sort of little things you might have in your religious bit of your world, which can be dealt with religiously, which are not the real things. It's the big things. And so I would encourage you this morning to say, well, can I come? What shall I bring? Not everything, but bring something. And they'll be interrelated. It's not just mixed up. You don't just have physical things and mental, emotional things and spiritual things. They relate to one another. As the disciples said there, it could be this man's sins called his blindness. Well, that happens sometimes. Some young person, goes off in a fit of anger or hubris and drives a stolen car and smashes it up and finishes up with head injury, and they don't see sin causing blindness. It's not always the case, but it links. You know that so many people because people have the sin of jealousy or that, they might work themselves to death so that they're better than their neighbours at something or other. Sin, can so often cause physical problems. And then physical disaster can cause you to be tempted to give up on God. It links the emotional, the mental. We are all joined up. So when you bring things this morning, there will be interactions. Because Jesus takes you on as a complete human being. So what will you bring this morning? That the Spirit, the light of the world, will break through and move molecules and change things in your life. Well, before you do that, I just want to finish by challenging you in the way the beginning of this passage challenges people. Because those disciples said, when they said, was it this man's sin? Was it his father's sin? And Jesus says, no, it's just something here so that God's glory can be revealed. Ask yourself, with what you might bring this morning, where does it come from? To start with, is it my fault? Are many of the things, whether they are a physical thing, I'm not fit because I'm eating badly, is it my fault? Am I full of anxiety, right? Because I'm far from God? Do I feel guilty because I'm sinning? Is it my fault? We could knock a lot of stuff out because it's my fault. And what we're asking then is to be repentant and for Jesus to come in and forgive us. I want to be forgiven. How many things are stuck in your life at the moment that Jesus could break through if you'd say, I need to be forgiven. It's my fault. I don't need to be blind. Or when they say, is it his parents' sin? How many things that are in your life at the moment that are a problem are a tangible issue because it's somebody else's fault? You don't need forgiveness for that. They might, but you don't. You need healing for that. How many of you are desperate to be forgiven for something you actually need healing from, that somebody's done to you? And that might be you forgiving them, whatever they feel. One of the biggest problems in spirituality is not distinguishing between what we need forgiveness for and what we need healing for. If you need to be healed from something that somebody else has done to damage you, you can spend your whole life at the cross looking for forgiveness. You think, Alastair, I'd never do that. But we're brought up to feel a sense of responsibility. The younger generation, my kids seem to think everything is somebody else's fault. I was brought up in my generation to think everything's my fault. But it's not. They're wrong and I'm wrong, actually. They're wrong to put it onto other people, but I'm wrong to put it onto myself sometimes. Lord, I bring something I need healing from that's been done to me. Or is it the third way where Jesus said, well, it's nothing to do with sin. You don't need forgiveness for it. And it's not anybody specific that you need to be healed from they're doing, but it's just the way it is. I know in the big scheme of things with original sin, everything comes from the fall. But in this man is not blind because of any reason except he's just blind. It's an opportunity for God to work. Things that happen, a lot of our illnesses, is nobody's fault. It's just the way it is, like the weather practically. Or the macroeconomic environment. Why are pensions so bad? Why is this so bad? There's some banker somewhere doing it. It's the system, but it's a presentation. We have a problem which we need God to reveal himself and help us in, and just give us a degree of release from. That's a different sort of thing, but you can bring it as well. So as we come this morning just to communion, I would just encourage you to be practical. Bring something out of the too difficult to do box. Do not use communion and our final songs as a displacement activity. Do not be worried that because we are here in a spiritual situation, it can only deal with spiritual things. But think of that situation where Jesus spits into the earth and the spirit and the earth come together and the man is healed. And allow Jesus to just push through on even quite a small thing, and to heal you, or forgive you, or restore you, depending if it's your fault, or somebody else's fault, or it's just one of those things. Because you might say, that sounds a bit hairy, but so it is having a lot of mud in your eyes and having to go and wash it off. But it's all worth it when you see at the end, isn't it? After all the theology, we have a finished man, a man who comes back, and it says quite simply, and he came back seeing. Isn't it a wonderful understatement of the Bible after all that stuff? And he came back seeing. In other words, he came back, Jesus having pushed through to change a situation, as he could do with you today. Whether you live here, whether you're on holiday, whether you're having a good week or a bad week, take something out of the too difficult to do box. The band are just going to come and play for us now. Very simple song, Open Our Eyes, Lord, we want to see Jesus. It sort of resonates with the... I remember years and years ago at a healing service where somebody's eyes were healed and he saw for the first time for years. And the leader of the great congregation there said, the good news is Frank's, or whatever, his eyes have been healed. The bad news is the first person he saw was me. But it would be a great thing that for this man, the first person he saw was Jesus. Open our eyes, Lord. We want to see Jesus, to reach out and touch him. Let's stand quietly together and sing.